you have been to VEGA meetings before. For those who haven't, welcome. And typically in meetings we go through some VEGA updates, some business, and then we have a panel or convening other members, program managers to speak about different areas of volunteer management, volunteer sending programs. But what we have not done is we have not brought in the volunteers. So we're really excited to hear from the volunteers, kind of a loaded question here, what makes a good volunteer assignment? So we have volunteers representing different organizations, and we also have volunteers from farmer to farmer and non-farmer to farmer assignments too. So there's a lot of different experiences here. The volunteers have gone on multiple assignments also, so different experiences not only with different organizations and different programs, but in different countries. So what we'll do is I'll introduce each of the volunteers. They'll have an opportunity to speak a little bit from their perspective, what is a good volunteer assignment, and then we'll open up to questions. I think we have about 40 minutes, so lots of time. And if you don't get your question, there's always wine and cheese afterwards. So let me start with Pam. I just met Pam about a half hour ago. I don't know her last name, but I do know that she's a volunteer at VEGA, so I apologize. You're going to have to introduce yourself here.
My name is Pam Karg. I'm originally from Wisconsin and work for Wisconsin Dairies. I was the past president of the Cooperative Communicators Association, so I know a lot of the organizations for which you work, but I don't know you. But the people before you, I know them. For the past 12 years, I went to Armenia for 6 weeks, and I stayed for 12 years. And I'm now in the process of moving to Georgia, the state of mind, not the state. And so I am just home for a short visit to see my mom back in Wisconsin. I happen to be coming out here because I had to get an Angola visa in person because I'll be doing a farmer-to-farmer there for CNFA in November. But I have been an NCBA CLUSA volunteer 3 times to Senegal. I have also worked with Land O'Lakes, and I have worked with CNFA, and one time I worked with Catholic Relief Services on their...
So you just have to talk to Partners of the Americas and Land O'Lakes.
They contacted me one time, but my junior high school Spanish is really bad. So when you get to Armenia, I can do that whole spiel. I was there when you were there. I know some of the people even know.
Well, great to have you. Thank you, Sam. We have Matt, who has a background in science and communications. Most of his assignments have actually focused on photography, which is very different and very interesting, and has some great pictures to share. Matt has volunteered with global communities in Rwanda, Uganda, and Mongolia. Susan Gurley, who you already know from the PowerPoint presentation. I think that surprised her a little bit. Yeah. Susan is an IESC volunteer. She's volunteered in Cambodia, and she's also the IESC Volunteer of the Year. And then we have Herbert Reed, or Herb. Herb works at the University of Maryland Extension. He specializes in integrative pest management and farm management. He has volunteered mostly for CNFA in Georgia, Mozambique, and Angola, and then also volunteered with the State Department in Kazakhstan, and did a volunteer, the Mongola volunteer was with ACDI VOCA. Right. Did I get it all?
Yeah, you got it all.
you have a lot going on.
Yeah.
And lastly, we have Makhtar Dayo. Makhtar just got back from a volunteer assignment with NCBA CLUSA in Senegal on Saturday, so we thank him for coming here. Despite all the jet lag, he is originally from Senegal and has done several assignments with NCBA CLUSA and is a agriculture specialist. So, Pam, we had asked do you want to start and we'll go?
Okay. I did mine yesterday at CNFA. Let them start, and I'll just come as peanut batter.
Fantastic. Okay, Matt, can we start with you?
Sure.
I'm a photographer.
Maybe I'll move a little out of the way. So, I'm going to talk about my work as a volunteer for global communities, and these photos are from my trips with them.
Do you want to drive?
Sure. So a little bit about me and how I came to do this work. I trained as a scientist in human genetics and biology, but I'm also a photographer. And my day job is in strategic communications. I tell stories. I joke that I sort of help translate science into English for organizations working in global health and things like that. So I have this photography that I do as well. And so I've learned a few things along the way that make for a great volunteer experience that creates value for everybody involved, I hope. So what I look for is that I want to see what your programs do. The best assignments for me are really in the thick of it, and no pun intended, you know, in this field of beans, but really the action. I mean, this wasn't you know, staged. This is what these folks are doing on this day, and I don't want to hear about. I should say I don't want to hear about it, but the best is not when we're talking about it, but when we're seeing it, when we're picturing it, and finding creative ways to demonstrate what these programs do. I love when you take me where the stories are. Like this photo, there's just a lot going on here. You know that there's a story here. And you know, Emerge is the program that I was working for. You know, you see that on her arm, but this in and of itself just tells you something about the work this woman is doing and the program. And so it's exciting to be in the thick of it. I want to land and put on my hiking shoes and go right into the field. And the best assignments really, I think, that excite me, show me why your work matters. You know, I want to picture work, take pictures of work that matters for people. That's why I do the work I do in global health, and that's why I do these volunteer assignments. And I want to see that. Those are where the stories are. Those are where interesting images are from the photographic perspective. When lives are being changed, when things are being done, that makes for the best images. And one thing that I really like when in a volunteer assignment is when you plan for spontaneity. You know, rather than storyboarding every second of the day, having the flexibility, the agility to just be somewhere where things are going on, or being able to divert from a plan when something is happening that lends itself to good photography. That's what happened in the case of this photo. And that's what I really like. You know, I want to go where the stories are, where the images are, and sometimes that's what the plan was going to bring me to, and sometimes it wasn't. But to have that flexibility is really a hallmark of a good assignment for me. And I like to try and take new and different perspectives. You know, in this case, this bag of beans, we were looking at the value chain end-to-end in Rwanda. Some of these things, people there on the ground, they said, "Oh, that's we know what that looks like. That's old hat." But if you back up and you're trying to tell your story to someone who doesn't know your work, or you're telling it to a donor, you're telling it to your AOR, they don't always know what that looks like. You might take it for granted, but taking that fresh perspective, you know, I don't know what the value chain looks like, and so I'm able to take a fresh look and try and find interesting images of that, and that's what another good assignment, hallmark of a good assignment is really being able to take a different look at things. And really the bottom line for me is that I want my work to be useful. I want it to live beyond the weeks, the days that I'm in country. And in the case of global communities here, I have just a few screenshots or a few shots here. I've been fortunate enough that they liked my work enough to put it, you know, in their annual reports, on the walls of their office, in their social media, you know, LinkedIn, Instagram, things like that. And that's what I want to see. I mean, I want to create images and help tell stories that help the organization. And so this is fantastic to see, and I like working with the organization to figure out how to make the most out of these assets, these visual assets, and see them take a life of their own and really be useful for the organization and for their stakeholders, whether that's the donor or whether that's you know, the missions and country, you know, as long as it's useful. So that's it for me. That's my perspective. I'm happy to talk further.
Yeah, fantastic photos. I'm just a follow-up question on that. You talk about So you want to tell the story, and when you're speaking in global communities, they're recruiting you for this assignment. You're going through your scope of work. Are they telling you what the story is that they want to tell, or is that something that you have to find for yourself? And how do you do that?
It's a little bit of both. They say, well, we've got this program that does X and Y, and I say, well, what does a farmer go through in their day? Can we talk through that? And can we come up with some ideas of how to tell a story, tell a narrative, not just a photo, but sometimes a photo that tells a whole story, sometimes a photo essay. And so we have a back and forth around that. Sometimes they say, look, we just need photos of, post-harvest handling in this, that's preventing this toxin from growing. And so there is some of that as well. But as a, a creative person, I have my ideas of what I would like to do in images and building narratives. I like those larger narratives, so I work with them to try and come up with some of those things. But it's a give and take of both.
Interesting. Yeah, really a different assignment than I think what most of us are used to. So I think we'll hold other questions until the end to make sure that we get through all the panelists. I know I'm not keeping myself to that rule, but for everyone else. So we'll move to Susan. When I asked Susan, how I should introduce her, she said as an executive director for capacity building, but it's always very challenging for her to talk about the type of assignment and the work that she does because, how'd you put it, it's soft, not photography.
This is the problem. I always come after somebody who describes something fabulous. Pictures. Remember the nut grinding person who developed a grinder that saved millions of people's lives?
You can blame Virginia.
So there's always something that somebody can showcase and say, this is what I've done. And I really can't. Because my job is to go and work with peer organizations and help capacity, their operations, their strategic plan, their fundraising, basically helping them to position themselves to remain sustainable. And that's very hard to quantify. But let me tell you what I think a good volunteer experience is like. And before I tell you that, I accepted my current job as executive director, and one of my conditions of employment was that they would allow me to continue to do this. So for me, that was not the money, not the vacation, not the benefit, but that is what I negotiated hard on. So I feel that I've been very lucky, and I didn't do it just to be good, but also because my doing this work makes me better in my current job. So I think it's very important to be honest about being a volunteer. It's a duality. We give something and they give just as much back. So a good volunteer assignment, and I think ISC does a very, very good job. They are clear as to what they expect, and I love that about them. It's not warm and fuzzy. They are like, this is what we expect you to do. These are the kind of outcomes we would like to see. And I love that because it is clear, and I can then deliver based on expectation. And what they also do a great job on is ensuring that the counterpart organizations know what I can do for them, so that there's no misalignment of understanding, because nothing is worse than going as a volunteer somewhere or having a job. Many of us have had jobs probably where the position description had nothing to do with the real job. And we were miserable and we left. So ISC does a really good job in prepping the counterpart organizations as to the background of the volunteer and what the volunteer will bring to them. And I think when you ask what's a good volunteer experience, is really good management of the organization that sends you, that they know the needs, they can articulate the needs, they find the right person, they expect follow-up from you, they treat you like a professional as if I were in a paid position, there's a deliverable at the end, there's follow-up, and I personally think that's one of the best expectations and best ways to manage a volunteer assignment. And then I'll just stop because I have an additional human aspect about why I like doing this. is that one of the people I worked with in Cambodia has a daughter who just moved to Budapest, and I'm part Hungarian, and I have put her together with one of my childhood friends who's putting her together with one of her children. So it all is this odd circle of this weird experience that is now beyond actually doing work. But this young woman from Cambodia, of the head of HR from Racha, daughter, is going to be part of my friendship circle in Hungary. And that's, to me, kind of the story of also kind of how we should be doing foreign relations, that people now, there's a circle, we all understand each other. But going back to a good volunteer assignment, clarity, clarity, and clarity of what expectations are.
And this is part of what this rolls into what Angela just presented with the Volunteer 360, looking at that picture, looking at the different components of what a volunteer assignment is, and you've been very helpful in contributing to that. So Angela might be asking you for that story also. Maybe after.
I'll take pictures the next time. I really like them. Will you volunteer?
Sure, I'm available.
No, seriously.
I am.
I need to explain mental health in a picture that doesn't frighten people. I'm telling you.
That's a tough assignment.
No, I'm serious.
I know.
I know. Okay.
But there are creative ways you can do it, too.
There are.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, but
very
that's
hard.
actually, that does sound like a tough assignment.
Can I talk to you?
Sure, yeah, I'm available.
Okay, Maxa, we'll move to you. Your PowerPoint's up next.
Okay. I didn't have really what the characteristic for a good volunteer is, but through my 10 slides, I hope you're going to pick up some signs of good volunteer and some bad volunteer as well. Yeah, this is a little bit about my background, my experience in academics. I have history degrees in the Philippines, Russia, and the United States. And I was also an agricultural researcher in West Africa, and headed the international program of Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania for 20 years. And I was always traveling to different countries in the world. So after Rodale, I am independent consultant, and I created an NGO called CRARA, Regenerative Agriculture Research Center for Africa. And right now, I'm a regenerative agriculture practitioner. I do it. I have my farm in Pennsylvania. I have my farm in Senegal. Now, these are the few assignments I have done with Kuluza, NCBA Kuluza, and this is soil fertility management, compost making utilization, conservation agriculture, and climate change and natural resource management. Now, few quotes I want to share with you, few beneficiaries, and this is what drives me when I see farmers or people I'm helping see their life changing, and just it's amazing. One farmer, which is called Samba Jibo, he told me that he came to the training session unknowingly that was a training on composting. He said, wow, this is very interesting. Why didn't we know about it? We don't want to be doing this. Now the next one is the Musa Mane, which is a farmer which I had an assignment last year in September. Did the training on composting. And luckily, I was also assigned this year at the same time to Senegal, doing composting in another area. But I said, look, I need to find out what these farmers are doing after I trained them a year ago. And I also given them some seeds for cover crops for soil conservation. And I want to see what is the outcome of this. Because when I do this kind of training or given something, I want it to be successful, to be useful. If I train farmers, so what? If they don't use the training, the technique you teach them. So I need to follow up. This mission, this assignment, I find the time to just travel to Amane in another region. I was surprised to see his farm where he used the compost he made in his house when I was training him last year. Here he is. I took a picture of him in his peanut crop where the compost we did last year was applied. Next slide, he showed me the same field with peanuts where he used few bags of fertilizers. Can you see the difference? Really, I was really thrilled. I was happy that he was able to really to use the training we did the year before And I think these are kind of things I said to Kuluga, if you can organize some exchange visits so all the farmers can see what is the impact of this training and the technology they are using. Next. This is the cover crop I give them seeds from. This is a velvet bean. I have used it successfully in Guatemala, and it was really very helpful in terms of soil regeneration. And also controls weeds, because this is the one field, and we use half of the field, we use the cover crop. See how much weeds are here? None. And all there is back of weeds. So this kind of technology is really very interesting for people who don't have enough resources and to buy chemicals. This controls weeds and also provides nutrients for the soil. It regenerates the soil. Next. This is me planting corn and cowpea in Senegal. This is my orchard, which I use as demonstration farm. A donkey and then the planter, and then my mango trees are behind there. I have also planted peanuts, all without chemicals. Next. This is my corn and cowpea intercrop. And this is moringa. So, next. This is I was trained when I did this training in Matam. And this boy was sent by his mother because the mother could not attend the workshop. How amazing. And I asked him after the session, do you remember what we talked about today? He said, yes, I'm going to tell my mommy because she was not here today. That's amazing. So involving young people, I think, is also crucial in terms of long-term impact on this project. Yeah, that's all. And I think through this slide, you may identify some characteristics, but I am really emphasizing two of them, which is availability and passion.
So just one follow-up question for you. So you're from Senegal, and you've done a lot of assignments going back to Senegal. So in your opinion, what is that experience of being a diaspora volunteer? Is it a different experience? What are the challenges? What are the benefits of it?
It's a different experience because they were expecting somebody from America, from an American. That was really very different, and they were really glad. In all sessions I had, my assignment was about 30 people per group, but always I had 50, 60, 70, 100 people coming in. So I think that's really, and I think they always also appreciate me leaving my family there in US and coming there, and I think they really appreciate it.
Great. Okay, moving on. Herb?
Okay, so that's my cover slide there, and I just showed some of the countries I've been in there. I don't have Angola on there because I haven't updated that cover slide to include that. Go on to the next one. And I just have, just a summary. I'm not going to, because we've already covered most of this, but I've worked with all farmer-to-farmer programs except for this one, which was directly with the U.S. State Department and University of Maryland Office of International Programs. Most of them have been integrated pest management, interesting farm management, and you'll see something I say later that would seem a little bit odd because I'm really not a farm management person, but I do have a lot of interest in it, and so I learned a lot by doing that assignment. The first one I did in Mongolia, and then later I did one in Mozambique on farm management. But mostly they've been integrated pest management, and then the last one I did in Angola was pesticide and fertilizer use, and most of them have been with CNFA. Okay, next slide is, okay, to me what makes a good assignment, and actually Susan pretty much summarized that the first couple points here, I think, because I'm basically saying the same thing. To me, and I've learned to really look at that scope of work carefully. Some of them are better done than others, and some of them you kind of have to look behind the information there, and sometimes I've actually going back and forth. Sometimes I said, what does this mean? And then I've turned down some assignments too. On the second point, you really need you want a good match with your skills and your interests because otherwise, you know, you don't want to just be a warm body to fill a slot. That's what I'm saying, I guess. It's really important to have a good match, and the volunteer is the only one that can really make that call. So you have to say, we're going to have to do it this way if it's going to be me, or you might want to just look for somebody else. And I think we need to be able to do that as professionals. And then I'm an extension person, and so I like to really see a good mix of working with extension workers as well as getting out on the farms. Because to me, in terms of bringing an expatriate from the United States to a country who has to teach through a translator, to me, you ought to, if you want to really maximize and leverage your impact, you really need to be training the trainer. So I love working with farmers. I do it every day in my regular work, but I can speak to them in English. And so if I'm having to use a translator, and that's my next point, is a really important thing. I want to, you know, I want to make sure that I'm having a lot of impact. And so by training the trainer, I think you get that. So I think to me that's a good part of any project. And then a good translator, particularly when you're in these technical areas. Actually, the best translator I ever had probably was in Georgia, and she did not have any agricultural training whatsoever. But she took her translation job so seriously that we would go through the slides, we would go through the PowerPoint, slide by slide. If she saw a word that she did not understand, she would ask me what it meant, and then she would also look it up on the internet to make sure that she really understood. And that really worked well. Now, and actually some of the people that I've had that had subject area experience did not necessarily, one of the things that sometimes happens is somebody does have a lot of subject area experience, they start answering the question themselves, and then you have to say, wait a minute, what did you just tell them? And so you know, say, you know, okay, you know, really it works better if you're the teacher, if you can have the question translated to you and then answer it. So to me, that makes so, and a skilled translator will do that. That's why it's really best if you have actually somebody who's actually trained in translation, even if they're not necessarily trained in subject matter. So to me, that really makes a difference. And for the most part, I've had really good translators all the way around. Also helps to have a good driver.
Only.
A couple of these countries, Mongolia, especially Mongolia, scared the crap out of me.
Georgia didn't? Georgia didn't?
Georgia did also, but not as much as Mongolia, because I don't know. It was they would big holes in the road, and they would mark them off with tree branches. I mean, it just, you know, we mostly drove during the day, which was good thing. But anyway, so good driver is good, important also. And then lastly, you know, why are we doing this? To me, a big part of it is to get to know people in other parts of the world. Because for me, I think that in terms of international relations, in terms of representing the United States and representing my university, I really feel like it's important to get to know the place where you are. So I like when there's a little bit of time to absorb some of those cultural experiences. So I have some pictures that show some of that. So the next one, here we are in Mongolia. The guy up there on the left, in front of that's a ger. The Russians would call it a yurt, but the Mongolians call it a ger. Basically the same thing. This guy had fought with the Russians against the Japanese in 1939. This was the year 2000. He's probably not living anymore. And I'm thinking, what are the chances that a farm boy from Pennsylvania meets a Mongolian who fought with the Russians against the Japanese in 1939? Okay? So that's just an example of some of the experiences that you have that there's no other way you're going to have them except for doing these assignments. And I got to deliver a calf to while I was there. So that was kind of interesting. And they do milk horses. So I got to sample the mare's milk as well. All right, the next one. Mozambique, I really like Mozambique, and I fell in love with the people there. This is part of the reason. You see these little kids walking along the side of the road carrying what I figure is at least a 5-gallon container. I don't know if you know how much water weighs. You know, pints a pound the world around. So a pint of water. So there's 8 pints in a gallon. So 8 pounds a gallon. So those kids are carrying 40 pounds on their head, at least, if you think about that. And you saw a lot of that. Water is a huge issue in Mozambique. And the other picture I like up there on the left, you know, a big part of Farmer to Farmer and USAID is gender inclusion. And if you look at that picture carefully, it tells a real story. You talk about pictures telling a story. You see there's 3 women there. And notice most of the activity is going on up here. This is where the people, see the person who's presenting is right over here. You can see him moving his hands. He's presenting, he's talking to mostly to this group. The 3 women are in the back. And everybody asked, people were asking questions. One of the women asked a question, and when she asked the question, she moved over to where the men were, and she asked the question. So this is a challenge in many parts of Africa in terms of gender inclusion. It's a big goal of the Farmer to Farmer program to promote gender inclusion because, after all, the women do a lot of the work in agriculture in many of these countries. Oh, maybe all of the work, yeah. Well, except if there's
spending the money.
Except if there's equipment involved or animal traction involved, then it's the men that are doing it. I've noticed that. Yeah. Okay. And then sometimes you just get lucky. And I was in Angola again, what are the chances that, you know, this farm boy from Pennsylvania is going to be in Angola on the 40th anniversary of their independence? Just happened. Just got lucky. And it was a fantastic time. I got some videos of school kids chanting and marching. And this was actually an agricultural co-op, and they put all their produce on their heads and marched in the parade. It was just a great time. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot this was in here. This is in Kazakhstan. This was a lunch that lasted for 4 hours. We actually took a break in the middle of it. And there was also more. There was also more food on the table after we were done than there was when we started, because that's kind of the way it works. And one of the, I guess you could say, delicacies was a sheep's head. Interesting. The last one, which I ran into in both Mongolia and in Kazakhstan, was fermented mare's milk. Think fizzy yogurt. It's definitely an acquired taste.
So we're going to have a surprise last act.
Yeah. I mean, who knew that I'd be here and you guys would have this meeting? I do appreciate being here. The last 12 years I have lived on my own in Armenia, not part of any really organized program, but there. I went for 6 weeks and stayed for 12 years. I did have a return ticket, but I just didn't use it. So I'm making the transition to Georgia now. I think your translator might be sitting in the back of the room.
No.
Oh, wasn't you? It was your coworker. Okay.
Hmm? It was Ia. That's her. Yeah, it was Ia.
So yesterday I made a quick presentation at a brown bag lunch at CNFA, and a lot of this has been covered. But one of the things I will tell you is that this is the hand that touched the man in Armenia. I'm like, and now everyone was getting jealous because I had my picture taken with George Clooney in Armenia in April. You can touch the hand, But I want you all to know that the work that you do with your hands touches our lives as volunteers so that we can go out and touch the lives of other people. And so your work is so important to all that we do. Now, people got jealous because I had my picture with George Clooney. Please don't be jealous. You can have your picture with me too. It's not a problem. Wine and cheese and me and coffee, it's like, and chocolate if anyone has a piece in their pocket. I'm loving you. And co-op, if we could mix all of that together, we'd be good.
But you're not saying that George Clooney makes a good volunteer assignment, right? He's like,
No. Oh no, but you know what? He has got to be one of the nicest people because I actually had an extended little visit with him. Even after he found out I'm from Wisconsin, we beat his Kentucky team in basketball. He still talked to me. Okay, so Armenia is where I have been living up in the left, and I'm moving to Tbilisi down in the lower photo. Yeah. And so that's Mount Ararat, if anyone wants to know that. My most recent assignment was actually through CNSA in Malawi. So I try to give some perspective. I do a lot of posting on Facebook because I'm a writer and a photographer by training, and those are soft skills. I take pictures, but not always. It's a little bit difficult to take pictures of strategic planning. But I do try to take some, and I'm always posting and then providing quite a little bit of an explanation because I do have a lot of students because I was teaching at the Agriculture University in Armenia, and I was teaching Georgians and Armenians. I also have a lot of American friends, and you know, there are a lot of people who think that Africa is a country, and therefore, you know, I just try to give them a little perspective that here's one of the 56 countries in Africa, and I give it some perspective so they know what size it is. And that's a little bit difficult. I, as a volunteer, I would like to know what other projects were going on in a country because I want to patronize those. This is something that a CNFA volunteer had been at a green shop, and they have a little cafe, and they were actually growing rhubarb. Now, you go to the former Soviet Union, they don't grow rhubarb because in the late 1800s, early 1900s, Russia outlawed the growing of rhubarb because it wanted to sell the rhubarb they were growing to Europe for medicinal purposes. So if you were caught in your peasant village growing rhubarb, you'd be put to death. So therefore, there's no rhubarb. I love rhubarb. I had to go to Malawi to get rhubarb, and that's the lower picture with this man. But I love to see these other projects that are there. I also like to talk to, when I can, the volunteer who maybe was working with a group before me. There was an incident with one group in Senegal where it turned out to be not a real cooperative. Not even not a real cooperative. It was, corrupt. Yeah, and then the NCBA staff felt bad for me, but I was glad that we were able to all detect it and catch it. And meanwhile, I was teaching the regular members to be empowered. So, yeah, I like to, when other volunteers are in country, sometimes it's really weird because I feel like you all don't want us to meet each other, but somehow we all meet anyway, either in the hotel or somewhere. The woman in the upper picture, she's done Land O'Lakes, she's done CNFA, and I'm not sure, she's probably done NCBA CLUSA because she does banking and such. And so we met at a hotel in Tanzania, and then she put me on to one of the guys sitting at this table, and then the B&B I was at, then this other guy from Montana was there. So it's always good to meet up with other people. Where'd it go? Okay. I just gave a little field, and this is something you might do too. Sometimes giving people just the, where do we do this? Slideshow. Oof. Sometimes giving people just a feel for where you're teaching. I mean, Malawi was really easy because it was in the living room. But when it's like underneath a tree, I mean, people find that fascinating. So sometimes giving a perspective of where it's at. A mushroom house, and I worked with mushroom farmers this time. And what I try to do is when I do something boring like strategic planning and marketing plans and that, I do try to include young farmers and I try to include women. And there is kind of this magic power that Americans have when we go overseas because, and I try to be very responsible in how I use it. For example, if the taxi driver did nothing wrong and the police stop him, I will get out and stand right there to make sure that the police officer is not asking for a bribe. But I also use it to reinforce that young farmers can be involved and lead a group, or women are, can be involved and lead a group. I also do like the whole cultural exchange, and this brings up the idea too. NCBA CLUSA knows me as being able to do cooperative education and organizational development. CNFA knows me as a communications specialist. Land O'Lakes knows me as co-op, and I can work on public speaking and such. And CRS is, I can't remember what they had me. NCBA, I just recently found out I know food preservation because of what I've learned in Armenia and Georgia. And I was living part-time in Kenya too for a while, and experiments I was doing there, and then just being from Wisconsin and knowing how to can vegetables and fruits and such. So I went in to do food preservation. I would say to you, really sometimes look beyond the forms that you have us fill out or the CVs that you have us get, because I can do chickens too. And you wouldn't know that. And I can do beef cattle, and am I saying that the right way? You know, I don't get to speak English all the time. But there's a lot more depth sometimes to your volunteers than maybe what you know. And so you need to really look at those sometimes. You can use them for that assignment, but, you know, I know it's America. I know you all want to separate work from your personal life, and you have these. But in the rest of the world, we don't. So I'm always real chatty with my handlers, right, Megan? And so, you know, like, how are you? And, you know, and this and this and this. But get to know your people, because there are a lot of things that they might be able to do that you don't know. And Nino is sitting there looking for a raspberry specialist to go to Kosovo. And guess what? You know, maybe I grow raspberries and I can go there and do that. But how do you know that? So you're sitting there pulling your hair out. Just get to know them. I do like to spend some time, and I found using some cooking kinds of things is a really cool way to reinforce my lessons and also to do some culture exchange. I make guacamole in African countries. They have avocado, they have tomatoes, they have onions, they have green pepper. I can find some cumin, I can find some salt, and then I smoosh it all together to make guacamole. And the first few times I've done this, like in Uganda, Tanzania, and Senegal, they're like, my God, what are you doing? I'm like, you have to understand, you're a tomato, you're an onion, you're an avocado, and you can be those things. But when you bring all of that together in a new and different way, like we do in cooperatives, you can come up with something even cooler than just the avocado, just the tomato, just the onion. And so I use cooking as a way, because I usually have a lot of women in my groups. They love recipes, and it's a way to reinforce the lesson. Also because there's sometimes high levels of illiteracy and such. I'm not going to be writing. I don't write French, speak French. I do this much Wolof and some of the other languages. But you can visually or through games and other things reinforce. And so I think to let the volunteers be creative as they are, I think it's great. But I always follow extension. I was doing mushrooms. I was doing food preservation, and the one woman on another assignment in Matam in Senegal, she's like, well, just have them put wax on top of the jam. And extension it specifically says never put paraffin wax on your jam anymore. It's not accepted. So I'm not teaching that because I don't want to be responsible if somebody gets sick. Translator, drivers, completely. Those are the people I put my life into. And when you have good ones and you hear from your volunteers that they're good ones, use them again. Use them again. And the cultural aspects, I'll go through that in a minute. The 360 discussions, so I left Senegal. I was there for 2.5 weeks or so in March, almost 3 weeks in March. And there was this little boy who kept coming every day. He's got a cleft palate. I came back and talked to a Sunday school group back in Wisconsin and told them about some of my travels and visits and farmer to farmer because it was Sunday school and their parents. And they designated the whole spring giving. They collected $500 and we're going to give that so this boy can get his cleft palate fixed because he was already being ostracized and he's so cute and cuddly and 2.5 or so, but he's got a cleft palate and you just know where that's going. And so they raised $500 and I'm going to be able to help send that over there because I know NCBA and I can trust Abibo and Yagamar to handle that money to make sure the cleft palate gets fixed. So with that, just to reiterate again, your hands touch our lives so that we can go out and touch people's lives. Everything people have said here is spot on. And I just want to add one more little thing about culture. You know, I go in and they're like, ooh, what is this guacamole? Or I make tacos a lot. In Nino in the back room from CNFA, she actually studied at the university where I was teaching in Armenia, and that's where I got to know her. Little did I know, but these 12 years later, somebody finally confessed that taco is actually a swear word in Georgian. So I've been making tacos all these for 12 years for Georgian students especially, and they're like, what are we going to eat? And I'm like, taco. And it's like a derivative of the word, the F word. So we're going to eat the F word, you know? So I make tacos in other countries as well, or guacamole, and people are just like, oh, I don't eat cheese. What do you mean you don't eat cheese? It scares me. I'm looking at this Kenyan girl, I'm like, cheese scares you? Come on. So I have to live up to that expectation where I tell people, come on, just try a little, just a taste, and if you try it and you don't like it, then never eat it again. But you at least have to take a bite. So I did that in July now when I was in Malawi, my first trip to Malawi. And I'll share with you just real quickly. Okay, it should. If anyone has follow-up questions, you can ask the panel and I'll get this set up.
Sure. Yeah, I think we'll have to.
Okay.
We'll see if it goes, but we're already about 5 minutes
Okay.
over. So fortunately, we do have wine and cheese. You can ask questions to the volunteers. But just some closing words. So as we're trying to answer this question of what makes a volunteer assignment and hearing all of the different volunteers' presentations, I think some of the common themes here are the management and then also the volunteer, which is really interesting. Thinking through on our side, making a good scope of work, making sure that the volunteer is aware of what they're doing, but then, as the volunteers also said, knowing their limits and knowing their capabilities, which is also really important. And then I have to say the last thing, which I think we have heard from all these volunteers, is the passion that is there for this type of work. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for participating in your presentations, and please take advantage of their time here and ask them questions over a glass of wine.
Yeah, please join me.